Rittvega and Sam Hancock was the fastest, and then they have this second 40-minute period to get a grid formed for the 2 races, one of which will be today, the other tomorrow. The cars are out on track, although I think they are going to make another return to the pits because the clock hasn't started for reasons that I can't instantly explain to you. But it is a wonderful entry. We'll concentrate on times to a degree, but a lot of this is going to be just wallowing in the sights and the sounds. David Addison and John Watson are trackside with our rose-tinted spectacles on. Nostalgia rules here, John.
Legends or legends, whichever. I mean, some of these cars, absolutely fabulous. And you think back to the days in the 90s and well, the Maserati MC12s, the Porsche. I mean, we just had the Panos go through. We don't see many Panos racing these days. And one of the pleasures of watching the Panos was actually listening to it, the bellow that came out of that. And what a great effort by Don Panos to put together a project to try and take on the might of the European manufacturers. There is the Maserati MC12 looking all the way through a Corvette. Mike Hazemans was one of the stars in period in a Corvette. And I'm not sure Mike's in that car or not. Laura, he is. Laura is the son of Twan Hazemans, second family with Twan. Mike Hazemans is the first of Twan's, trying to get it all out. So Hazeman family well represented here indeed.
Yeah, they'll be driving the Lotus Elise that Mike Hazeman's raced in period. We'll do some car spotting. They're the Maserati MC12, the Vodafone, red and white colours. You don't see very often. I think it was Racing Box that ran that in the Italian GT Championship. But the car that you see Alexander Rittvega and Sam Hancock drive in the familiar Vitaphone colours. Vitaphone morphed into Vita 4.1, you might recall, in the final analysis. But at the time, it was the Vitaphone colours, and that car from the FIA GT1 World Championship was the Alexander Negrão and Alessandro Pierguidi car. So then as now, because you've got Alessandro in the Spa 24 Hours this weekend, and there's a car he drove, well, not all that many years ago, but time marches on. That dates back, that car, to 2005. That's when it was built, but of course they were being raced for another 5 or 6 seasons after that, and it was the Maserati MC12 really that created the early balance of performance, because it was such a revolutionary and radical car compared to what was around at the time that the organisers wanted the Maserati on the grid but needed to handicap it a little bit, and that was done by rear wing adjustments, ride height and so forth, and was the real catalyst for the BOP. There, Peter Cox with the Lamborghini, another car from the FIA GT1 World Championship days, number 125. It is a car that Ricardo Zonta and Frank Hechler shared in the championship in the familiar colours of the time of Blancpain, of course an early sponsor of the Endurance Series. Peter Cox was at Silverstone a week and a bit ago, doing lots of demo laps in the Ferrari 550, a car that he had great success with, and another Italian brand here, the Lamborghini, up towards Les Combes. And Peter Cox has had a very long and varied career, but always been successful.
Across touring cars, GT cars, the Lancia, the Lamborghini Murcielago, and we don't hear or see many of these days other than in these events. And certainly, again, a car wonderful to listen to, and a car that I think maybe was underrated in period. As we see the 64, the Corvette, personal best, fastest overall, Sector 1. And again, the Corvettes, remember how strong they were in GT racing in period. I mean, particularly when the factory Corvette team came over en masse to Le Mans and other events in the championship. And they knew how to win 24-hour races, or their category certainly in 24-hour races. Ran a very disciplined operation. It was either their way or the highway, and it usually led to success.
And that is a genuine Le Mans car. Adrian Wilmot at the wheel of it, whose racing career started in the 1980s in Formula 4, had a long layoff to go and build up businesses, as people do, and then came back. This car retired from Le Mans in 2009, but run by Mike Jordan and Andrew Jordan's Jordan Racing team these days. It is, as you would expect from JRT, absolutely mint, not only in terms of the livery, but also the way it is run. So it may have retired from Le Mans, but don't expect it to retire from the races here. Rather crowded pit lane, as the Maserati can't get past all the GT4s that are queued up. And down the pit lane comes either Alexander Rittvega or Sam Hancock. It's shown as being Sam Hancock, but we await confirmation as to that. The Bentley, it's hard to think of that as a historic car. It doesn't feel 5 minutes into
I had to take another look and see. I mean, Bentley, I mean, they were only racing with us, what, 7, 8 years ago as a factory team. But there they are, running as a legend. And I mean, to me, that was always one of the exciting brands that came in to the GT3 world. A large car built by, up in Cumbria. What was the name of the company?
M-Sport.
M-Sport.
Malcolm Wilson's
team. And it was a big car, but it was one of those cars I described it in period. It was always very light on its feet. It had the benefit of all the rally technology and experience, especially around shock absorbers, springs, all that kind of thing, where rally cars, it's hypercritical. And they built that into the Bentley, and they made a large GT car into a very nimble, race-winning GT car. Ought to have maybe won more races, because the car had the ability to win, just let down occasionally by mechanical issues.
They had its first win at Silverstone when the Guy Smith-Stephen Kane car came back from a penalty, and drama's there. That, I think, is Stephen Osborne's BMW, which has got all smoky. He's parked the car off the road. He's found a fire extinguisher. He hasn't found a marshal, but he's found the fire extinguisher, so he's doing the job himself here. Stephen Osborne, relatively new to racing, coached by Chris Ward, and that's brought out a red flag, because with a smoky car...
I mean, just fortuitously found the opening in the barrier, and there was a fire extinguisher able to get it operational, but of course it's in the interests to bring this to a temporary stop, a red flag.
There's the Ford GT1, again from the GT1 World Championship era, number 40, Philip Scamama's car. That's the GT that Bas Linders and Mark Henrici shared.
And while it looks like a GT40 from period, the original GT40 raced in 1964. It grew out of the Lola that Eric Broadley designed, that then morphed itself into the GT40. And this is then the what's the word that you...
The evolution.
The evolutionary version. It's a much bigger car, but it's still got the V8 Detroit Ford motor on the back, but physically a much larger car.
So everybody now has to head for the pit lane, and we'd hardly done any proper lap times. 1:28, Matt Holm shown as the driver of the Chevrolet Corvette that he shares this weekend with Andrew Jordan. It's a ADAC GT winning car when Diego Alessi and Daniel Kalvitz drove it. They're just going through shot the Leopard liveried Audi, Johnny Westbrook's car, that Vasily Vladikin and Mikhail Loboda share. A WRT original, and cars from recent GT times like the Bentley and the early BPR days like the 911 GT2, the 993 shaped car in the background there. Look.
Keeping an eye out for car 75. Not surprising, it's a Porsche 997 GT3 RSR, driven by a good friend Lee Maxted Page. Lee does a lot of 2-litre Porsche, that one-make Porsche series, but he does get an outing in something a little bit more powerful, and he's got that opportunity here this weekend.
There's the Paynos heading for the pit lane. The Dams car from American GT sports car racing, a Doc Bundy, Andy Wallace, Eric Bernard era. Viper to the pits, the Ford GT to the pits. It's a wonderful entry, this, it really is. You can spend as much time reminiscing about the history as watching the race.
What makes it special is the sun is shining on them. I mean, you couldn't have a more perfect situation for these cars to go out on track, ideal conditions. Okay, we've got a revised circuit in terms of 80% or so of the circuit has been tarmacked, and you can see it actually very clearly here today, maybe more so than I noticed it yesterday. This is old tarmac coming down into Fania, but as they then go into, I think, into Campos and out of Paul Frere, then it goes back to the old surface again.
You see the FAT liveried Porsche just of Mark Sumpter through shot. They're the first of the red and white cars.
Let's give them a little commercial call. Paragon Porsche.
Paragon Porsche.
There you are, Mark, done in a bit.
Another very successful racer over the years. Came into racing through Porsches in the UK, and then had a spell with Mike Jordan in the FIA GT Championship, and a winner of a Silverstone 24-hour race. There, 3 decent names for a BMW, the Jürg Müller, Pedro Lamy, Uwe Altzen car from the GT2 era.
Uwe Altzen, what an operator. I mean, what a race driver. I mean, yes. He was elbows out, but I tell you what, he got some great results.
So 256 ready to rejoin the session. The worked BMW stable. That car driven by Yannick Trappwein. and taking you to 2009. So there, 35, the MK ex-Steve O'Rourke Porsche from British GT, if you look at the livery of the car.
When you look at these cars, these Porsche I'm looking at right now, and compare it to where we are with the current 992 Series 2 GT3 RSR version, I mean, these are like dinky toys compared to the current car.
Yeah, they look so small, don't they?
Tiny.
In the background there, the white Porsche, the Perfect Circle car, that's one that in 2019 we saw in the Kyle Army 9 Hours. And in the space of a few short years, it's become eligible for Legends racing. It's the South African driver, Andre Bezuidenhout, who has brought that car over and brings it now to the pit lane. So the session is going to resume on short notice, so as soon as possible we'll get things back underway. There is Mike Jordan at the wheel of the Flying Lizards Porsche. Mike always absolutely adored that livery, bought the car and has had it painstakingly put to the correct colour scheme. Now the caption says Andrew Jordan. Let's have a look. That looks rather more like
Dad.
Mike to me. And
You
it
know
is
what?
Dad, yes.
It does make a change when you prepare a car of this sort of quality to building a series of A35s for a one-make series, doesn't it? I mean, how diverse is the Jordan family business, preparation business? Unbelievable.
Absolutely. Mike made his name in Porsches. He had a spell in Formula Ford, and he started off in a Morris Minor, of all things, in classic saloon car racing, but it was winning the Porsche Championship in the late 1980s, around about 1986, that really put Mike on the map and prepared his own cars and did so well that other people said, could you prepare mine? So suddenly what was then Eurotech began, and it grew, and now the Jordan Racing team. But Mike, hugely versatile. He's been, as you can see, a star in GT cars, British GT champion, still racing these very competitively, and was there winning 2 out of 2 in the Mini 7s around Thruxton 3 or 4 weeks ago. Loves his racing. And Andrew, his son, 2013 British Touring Car champion. There, the Paynos is waiting its turn. 507 is the ex-Darrell Young Aston Martin in its Macau colour scheme that Stefan Jocher and Alexander Lienau share.
So that's a car from 2011. And it still doesn't, you can see the lineage in the Aston family all the way through, even to the cars we have here this weekend in the 24 hours. This, as is the case with Porsche, the fundamental of the car has remained unchanged.
So driver change.
No easy task.
It's not, is it?
Clambering into the cockpit of a GT3 car.
Right, we're back in business. So the clock restarts. Maserati, Ferrari, Porsche, Lamborghini, Ford, Porsche make their way down the pit lane, up the hill. And Andrew Jordan, the fastest so far, 2 minutes 20.935. I think, well, that is what he's telling us, therefore, is that the second named driver on the entry list is the one that's actually in the cars at the moment. There is the number 14, Evgeny Kirev, Maserati, as I say, from the Italian GT Championship. There was the Red Bull colours, there was the Scuderia Play Team Serra-free entries, but the Vodafone colours you didn't see very often in the Italian GT Championship, largely. 57 Ferrari, Jonathan Mitchell's 458 Italia, so not that old a car. There, at the very back of the queue, one of the early BPR Type 911s, the black and yellow car, the 911 GT2. There it is. And 55 is this car of the South African driver, Andre Bezuidenhout, the man behind the Perfect Circle team. And that car coming now down to the Piff-Paff. If you zoom in closely at the bottom of the drivers' names on that side, it's a bit difficult, admittedly, for the cameras, but amongst the drivers listed there, you will find the name of Stefan Rattel, who drove that car in one of the early BPR races. And there it goes, turns through the corner. Enzo Calderare, Lillian Keller, as she was before she became Lillian Brinner, and with Enzo won the Spa 24 hours outright. Andreas Fuchs and Stefan Rattel, the names on the side of the car. we'll go and find one or two others of interest in due course, but we'll keep an eye to the Porsche. But to go back to your point, John, you see that, which at the time looked like a really outlandish Porsche, and you compare it now, it's tiny, and you see how far GT racing has come.
I'm looking at this car. I've got a black 2.7 RS road-going version, and it looks about the same size as this full-on race car. And in period, this race car made my road-going 2.7 RS look like literally a tiny little road-going Porsche. It's just the way evolution and motor racing, GT, whatever level you look at, the cars have just grown and grown and grown.
125 out of La Source. That's Peter Cox again, who should be up there towards the top of the times. It's a Corvette 1-2 at the minute.
Well, he's actually in 5th place right now, Peter Cox. So clearly, let's see how far back Peter Cox is. Well, he's 4.9 seconds back from the fastest time, which is held by the 128 Corvette, and we've got a Corvette in the second row. The two Corvettes are locking out provisional front row of the grid.
Up to Lecombe streams the pack, and there is Andrew Jordan, fastest thus far then in number 128 Corvette. You see it in its ADAC GT Masters livery. It's a car built in 2013. It was a ADAC GT Championship winning car for Diego Alessi and Daniel Karlvitz. Ignore the fact that it says Matt Holm. It's Matt that owns the car, but Andrew Jordan is behind the wheel of it, and says in terms of both of the Corvettes that JRT are running just what really nicely put together machines they are.
But if you do a proper preparation job on a car like this, and I'm not sure if they still ran a leaf rear spring in these Corvettes, or they'd actually at this stage moved forward into a proper, I would call, independent rear suspension. But for many, many years, the Corvette had a leaf spring running across the axle, and that's how the car was manufactured. Stopped a Porsche, and that's
the MK liveried car, isn't it? Isn't that the Steve O'Rourke, Tim Sugden car that's had a lose towards the barriers? And 35 hopefully can get going again. This car driven by either Peter Fairbairn or Paul McLean. It has got going again.
There's another Porsche creeping up now. Whether the two of them got together or whether that's just coincidence.
It's Mark Sumter, I think. And that, I fear, is going to pull off the racetrack as Mark Sumter's car got damage. It certainly brought out the white flag.
It's difficult to tell. Running so slowly when he's pulling off, he's looking for a gap in the barriers to pull off and get that car pushed back into. So he's able to reverse it. I mean, amazing.
Mark Sumter gets it out of harm's way. That car again in the original colours, carried by Jean-Pierre Jarier, Eric Comas and Jesus Pereja. Again, going back to those early BPR days, the forerunner of SRO, BPR being Barth, Peter and Rattel. Jürgen Barth, Patrick Peter, who has still involved in the sport, still involved with Stefan Rattel because he's brought this grid to the event, and Stefan Rattel eventually decided to go it alone, started SRO. Patrick Peter didn't want to deal with Bernie Eccleston when the opportunity to become the FIA GT Championship came up, so Patrick concentrated on running historic events, and Stefan set sail with SRO, and the rest is history.
As they say. Interesting, the car you mentioned about Jean-Pierre Jarier, better known to us chums in time as Jumper Jarier.
Yeah.
Never knew why.
There's a story in the March book, Mike Lawrence's book, that one of, was it Robin Hurd's children, couldn't say Jean-Pierre, and he kept saying Jumper. 76 has now gone off at Eau Rouge, and there's liquid on the ground.
I think that's liquid that's in the tyre bale, that when the car hit the tyre bale, or hit the binding that keeps the tyres together, I think that water has come from, because it's quite a big spread.
Now that's the Jean-Louis Rion, Nick Padmore car. I'd be surprised if Nick Padmore did that. But it's interesting that you've got 3 Porsches that have been off, and now the car is going to have to park.
Yeah.
I think it's liquid. I think he's hit the wall, and that's damaged the radiator personally. But interesting that he can't rejoin, you see.
Yeah.
We'll see. But that brings out another yellow.
Where the radiators on the Porsche are located, they're very vulnerable in the front corners. That's what we can see what happened. So he loses it, and the nose swings round and clobbers the tyre bales. And that would, on the left side, indicate that the radiator has been breached, and it's a red flag yet again. So it's a bit of a broken up session for all the runners. Difficult to get a rhythm going, get yourself dialed in. These are not professional drivers. There are many in this who are virtually professional, but bulk of them are not.
That car is another genuine Le Mans entry. It was 15th overall, 4th in class in 2005. It was the Raymond Narak, Romain Dumas, Sébastien Dumais car. but now it's got some damage at the front. Jean-Louis Rion, by the look of the crash helmet, was behind the wheel of it. That didn't look like a Nick Padmore crash helmet to me. So everybody comes back to the pit lane. One of the sadnesses of this, of course, is that by the time you get to the... You give people lots of track time with practice and qualifying. By the time you get to the race, some of them have had dramas and aren't able to take part. Real shame.
Yes, it is. We don't know what has caused the incident. We've seen a couple of Porsches off, 2 at Eau Rouge, and then we saw Sumter's car being pulled off up at the top of Les Combes.
And they've had 2 red flags now, which sometimes means that race control is frustrated, but we'll see how much more time they can give to the teams. Because as we made the point earlier on in the GT4 session, there's an awful lot to cram in during the course of the day, and marshals are on post all the way through, not to mention our camera crews. But first of all, you've got to get everybody back to the pit lane, and there is, now is that the Porsche limping back, or is that another one that we found from somewhere?
Well, we'll know in a minute, because if it is Mark Sumter's car, he will come to a standstill and then reverse the car behind the barriers. So...
No, that's 76 that's got going. That's Jean-Louis Rion. The cause of the flag, but he's bringing it back to the pits by the look of it.
So if that's the car that you thought had breached a radiator, they've run out of water. He's pulling off here.
Yeah. Well, there's some oil on the road, we understand, between...
And he's pulling it off, and that car's going to have to be craned onto the back of a flatbed. And but there you see the radiators on this case. You're looking at the left side, and there's a water radiator directly behind that, and they're very. It has always been the vulnerable part of these 996 Porsche.
So out gets Jean-Louis Rion, who has a nice collection of cars, whether they're sports cars or Grand Prix cars, and has done a lot of racing with Nick Padmore in recent times, learnt a lot from Quick Nick, and takes off his helmet and awaits recovery of the Porsche. Goes to assess the damage, and here coming is Mark Sumter's spin. That was a big, big moment, wasn't it?
Certainly was, over the top of radio, and we've been told that there's oil on the track between turns 1 and 5, so that's from the source basically all the way up to Les Combes. And maybe Mark Sumter was one of the early cars through. There we see the speedy track services that we have here at Spa. We've got a vehicle out, hopefully clearing some of the gravel off, and another vehicle, recovery vehicle, that will hoist that Porsche. And there again, look at going down against what would be the natural flow of traffic at Eau Rouge to see whether there is oil on the line. Certainly I would not expect to see Mark Sumter losing a Porsche as we saw just a second or so ago.
Aston Martin's in the queue, coming round to the pit lane, at the front of which is the Audi in the leopard colours, the sort of black and turquoise. There it is. Let's head to the pit lane next and join Antonia Rankin. Let's see who she's found.
Can you, oh, we've got the car coming through now. Can you tell me a little bit about what it's like to drive around such an iconic circuit?
Oh, basically, I'm really amazed because this weekend I participated in 2 series, in GT4 and classic cars. And basically for the classic cars, it was a big surprise because our main pilot didn't come, so they asked me to join, and it was a really pleasure for me to be there in 2 races. I mean, not in 2, even in 4 races, so it's really nice. And the track, basically one of the best, no, the best in the world, definitely the best in the world. Weather is fantastic, people are amazing, parade, everything is really nice.
What's the main difference in the feel of the cars between the GT4 and the Classic?
Basically, there is much more aerodynamics in Classic because we drive GT3. Even if it's old, it's still really very, very stable in fast corners, and I like it because it's a new experience for me. I am mostly driving GT4, now it's GT3, so I'm really happy.
Well, I'm glad you're happy. Best of luck this weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrei Solokovtsev replacing Mikhail Loboda. We've had quite a few shuffles to the entry list, but good to have the GT4 driver there. This is going to be a long stoppage, I fear, with a big chunk of the track now needing to be treated.
Yeah, you can see the workers on the circuit putting down what we might locally call speedy dry to mop up all the oil that's been spilled and that's on the line as you would come in to Eau Rouge, and people use the curb, that yellow and red curbing on the left-hand side to make then your cut back to make your apex actually just after the compression at Eau Rouge. And that's where we saw Mark Sumpner, and he must have been, I say, one of the first cars through at pace and just got caught out by it. And he did he probably got high marks for a rotation. Luckily, no damage to the car, but I'm sure that Mark pulled it off and will take that car back and give it a good looking too.
Yes, the Paragon team that will operate that car with him. Lots of experience. So you can see the cars in the pit lane with the Alexander Rittweger, Sam Hancock, Maserati in front of the queue. There, a familiar name, Vincent Voss, of course, has won the 24 Hours as a driver and as a team owner. His Viper that he drove with Eric Ellery and Emmanuel Clerico sits tight with Eric Mastag and Christophe Van Riet as the drivers. That car for FIA GT seasons and a 1999 built car, but it was really in the early noughties, 03 onwards, when that car started to be part of the Spa 24 Hours grid. The touring car element of its history was coming to an end because there wasn't really a representative European championship, and the race was becoming for really production saloons. So it was the RACB and SRO that totally revolutionised the Spa 24 Hours by moving to the GT era.
Has the clock stopped?
It has indeed, because it's a qualifying session.
Yeah, so this is going to be probably 10 minutes or more to get this all cleaned up.
Yeah, how much time they give them. We're 8 minutes away from a restart, but whether we get the full 26 minutes or it's a notional period. I'd like to know which car dropped all the oil. Whether it was the Jean-Louis Rion Porsche that then went off on its own oil. It was hard to gauge.
Could have been. Well, obviously it was a gusher because a lot of oil has gone down.
Let's go back to the pit lane. We've talked about 112, the Chrysler Viper. Antonia has managed to put herself in that pit box now.
Eric, we have got an absolutely incredible car in front of us. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's one of the oldest cars in this plateau, because it's a car of 99. Which is the oldest. When you're racing against Ferrari from 2017, you cannot even think about a podium. But anyway, it's a great car. It has a great history because it has raced in Francorchamps and her in Le Mans, and it was part of the Paul Melmondo team, and it has raced with Vincent Voss and Eric Hillary, which are well known in Belgium and France.
Well, despite maybe not being able to compete with some of the more modern cars, how does it feel to drive around Spa?
The difference between the old-timers and the modern cars is that, I'm sorry, I'm going to be a little bit rude, but with the old-timer, you race with your ass. It means that you feel the car with your ass because you don't have any electronic assistance. It's only you, the engine, and the steering wheels.
Do you feel a real connection to the vehicle?
Yeah, it's an amazing car. It's pretty safe, safer than the car of the 60s or the 70s, but it's an incredible car. And even if it's an old car, you can compete with other new, less oldest car.
Well, you've got some great names who've raced in this car. Obviously, Vincent Voss is here this weekend. Has he come to have a look?
No, but he knows that I have the car, but I'm sure that he would be very happy to know that this old car is racing on the circuit, but I think he's pretty busy now with the modern car, so I will forgive him.
I'm sure he would be very happy. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The Viper's got an 8-litre V10 motor in it. I mean, it's not exactly sort of a shrinking violet in terms, but that was part of the success that the Viper had. This amazing, it was an engine from the truck division of Dodge that they then built into the Viper, and competing against Corvette. So the effort that went into that program meant that they enjoyed a great deal of success.
Looking down from the drone, the track lies quiet for the moment. Restart as soon as possible, really. We're about 5 minutes away from hopefully getting things back in business. The Endurance Legends, and there's a touring car equivalent of this that will qualify later in the day. Also, the centre of attention in the paddock. There, the marshals hard at work. But it's a long, long line, isn't it? All the way through. In fact, it can't be that Porsche because it stretches all the way up the hill. So somebody that dropped oil and then Mark Sumter's car, I guess, with the like a candidate, because he had that big spin and then it stretches to where he parked. There is an empty Flying Lizard Porsche. And if you think the stickers are good on that, well, let me tell you, run your hand along it. You cannot feel a join. It's been painted, and it's just a work of art, that.
Are you saying that's not a wrap?
Yes.
It isn't a wrap. It's a paint job.
It's an outstanding. You need to go and have a look at that. Mike Jordan will be only too pleased to show you, but it's an absolute credit.
I don't know whether there's more speedy dry being put down than there was 10 minutes ago, but it looks to me as if it's taking a longer period to get this cleared than anticipated.
There are some cars that didn't get a lap time in, and there are some that now won't go back out because of problems. So we'll wait and see how many we get for this afternoon's first race, which will have the mandatory pit stops. Let's go back to the pit lane. We've been drooling over Mike Jordan's Flying Lizard's Porsche. It is a genuine Flying Lizard team car, and Antonio has caught up with Mike Jordan now.
Mike, of course, you're a very experienced driver yourself, and we've got a fantastic car behind us.
Yeah, it's brilliant. We've just finished restoring this. This was the first ever car that Flying Lizard had back in 2004 for IMSA. So it's a really famous car which we restored last year or so. So this, what better place to bring it and do this event? So we're having fun. We've got a little problem with the fuel injection at the minute, so we're not going to run it again in this session, just until we've sorted that out. But it's brilliant fun to drive.
Well, 20 years past its prime, does it still have it?
Yeah, it does, absolutely. It's very pure, very raw car to drive. Still on a sort of manual sequential gearbox. I love these old 911s, they're brilliant to drive.
Would you say there's a big difference between cars like this in the funness to drive and the more modern cars that we're seeing on the circuit today?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Andrew's in a GT3 Corvette at the minute that's on pole, and that moved on a lot. That's all paddle shift and with ABS and with traction control and efficiency. They're great, but they're nowhere near as much fun to drive. They're sort of a little bit dull, and the modern GT3 cars are hugely efficient. The pace they do around here, 15s, is just crazy. But things have moved on a lot from when they did these.
Well, these have an enviable reputation, these cars. What was it like to restore?
No, it was really good. The car was in very good condition, to be honest. So we just had to do all of our normal stuff. That's what we do for our job is restore these old cars like this. It was mainly getting the colour scheme right and the livery, because I wanted it exactly as Lizard had it in the day. So it's been a labour of love for a few months, but I'm really pleased with it now.
Well, it looks absolutely incredible, and hopefully it's just as good to race. Thank you very much.
Great to hear from Mike Jordan, but what is interesting to me is son Andrew, in that Corvette, has done a lap time which is within probably about 5.5 seconds of the very fastest single lap we saw in qualifying. So, I mean, that's pretty impressive, both from Andrew and from the Jordan family with the preparation and from the Corvette. I mean, you could put that Corvette into this weekend's 24-hour race and it could finish in the top 20, maybe top 10, if it didn't have any issues.
Andrew, going back a decade, won the British Touring Car Championship and stayed in the series for a few years after. But it's a shame in a way that he didn't go the GT route, because I think he would have been a real asset to teams. Very, very quick driver. No real ego to Andrew. He just gets in the car and delivers. And Mike was always the same. You know, Mike was a British GT champion, raced here in the 24 hours in a variety of cars, Porsches as well as Mercedes with the Jones brothers.
I mean, you had a lot of friends in touring cars. One I always thought would make a natural conversion from touring cars into GT racing was your mate Jason.
Plato.
Yeah. But he's not. He's not racing now at all.
No, he did. I want to say he did a sports prototype race here one year, the John Mangaletzi series, but no, in GT terms, no, it's a great shame we didn't see him in that. Peter Cox gets set ready to go. The restart time kicked back 5 minutes. But I'd be surprised, actually, if they were able to run the full 26 minutes now, because there's so much else that has to be put into the day. We'll see.
Well, the cameras are not focusing on the area at Eau Rouge with all the oil spill, so we don't know how progress is going along. But there seemed to be a lot more speedy dry being put on the track as we look now from Les Combes down. Again, you're right, that was Mark Sumter's car. Yeah. So the oil that came from that car, I mean, that was a pretty serious oil. That's a hose departing from either the engine or from the oil tank or something from the dry sump system. So there it is. Now, are they going to leave it like that and let everybody go and let the cars then do the rest of the cleaning up? That looks pretty much, to me, that was the decision that's been made. Get them back out on track, but give them a warning that from here all the way through Eau Rouge and up to the very top at Les Combes, there's a lot of sand or speedy dry. Here we go. Nice way to drag a bit more on.
Well, I was just thinking.
Doesn't really matter.
I mean, that'll all get dissipated pretty
Yes,
quickly.
I mean, in the space of about one lap, the cars will dissipate it all.
So that drives across it. The marshal with the broom just trying to sweep a little bit more onto a line. But we can't be too far away. 5 minutes or so, I think, before this session gets back underway. The fans eagerly await not just the sight, but the sounds of these cars. We say it with modern, it's the same with historic GT cars. They all make a wonderful noise.
Actually, I'm curious to know where that time of Mike Jordan would have placed him. Okay, the slowest car we had in provisional qualifying was a 2:21. So he would have been on the back of the grid in a Corvette and probably would have gone quicker.
Indeed so. Andrew Jordan in that Corvette we're talking about. Peter Cox we've touched on with that Lamborghini, reunited with the car, and Antonia is now with him.
Well, this is an incredible car that we've got here. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Oh, what can I tell you about it? I mean, we developed the car with Writer Engineering. I was involved from the moment it started, and it's just nice to bring it back to the circuit, and I think everybody enjoys it and loves the sound.
Well, we've got the Blancpain livery on the front. Obviously, a lot of the cars here are a lot older than yours. What's it like to race against... That's all right. What's it like to race against the cars that are so much older than yours are?
Well, there are cars older, but there are also cars younger, and I must say we are just here to show the car, and there are people who actually drive full-time in this championship, and they make a really big effort, you know, to do well. So I don't think the comparison is fair, but we'll try to do our best anyway.
Of course, well, best of luck. Thank you.
Well, Peter Cox, a real star in touring cars, and when he drove for Honda, if I remember correctly, and was just one of those drivers who could step into any racing car and deliver a performance.
You see the Gigawave sticker on the side of the car. The late Henry Barzinski was the former owner of that car, and Gigawave used to provide a huge amount of technical nous and the RF cameras, the pit lane cameras for SRO GT racing, and nice that he is being remembered by that car being on track. Back to the pit lane, and there is the Bentley run by the CMR team, Classic Modern Racing, Charlie Buscherud's team. And race control confirmed that we are just 2 minutes away from getting the session back underway. We've had no suggestion that it won't be for the remaining 26 minutes, so the teams do have the track time available to them. The fact that's got a 7 on the front makes me think that it was one of the Works cars, even though it's not in Works colours now, but from that original M Sport line. Gregory Drio, the driver of this 2014 chassis from the early days, the original iteration of the Bentley.
I always think of Maxime Soulet as being one of those drivers who, again, outstanding behind the wheel of the Bentley. As we look at the 128 Corvette, the car that is currently the quickest. Andrew Jordan was the driver behind the wheel. Just hope when everybody goes out on track, they are made aware that half the circuit, certainly from turn 1 all the way up to turn 5, has got a lot of, say, speedy dry or whatever the component they now use to dry up oil spills onto circuits.
I think that is now Matt Home in the car. Doesn't look like Andrew Jordan's overalls or helmet, but the JRT Corvette will go in a moment. I like Automobile Sport in deference to the excellent German published, but English language as well, magazine. It's an excellent magazine. They're the ex-Franz Viet, Nico Viet 911 GT2 from those early days of BPR into FIA GT racing. 22 is the car of Sebastian Glaser and Michael Kammermann. And the team saying you've got just over 25 minutes or so of the session still to go. Sebastian Glaser, we think, is the man behind the wheel. Have another look at the crash helmet, maybe, if we can get around the other side and confirm that car good to go. Another of the 993 shaped Porsches is 103 of Olivier Piquet, which now joins the queue because we're about 10 seconds away from getting things back moving here at Spa-Francorchamps, with 26 minutes, 26 seconds still on the clock. There is the Team Perfect Circle Porsche. And the green flag is waved, so trying to work out whether that is Alexander Rittweger or Sam Hancock in the Maserati, but that will lead the queue up the hill. Adrian Wilmot behind, we know that because he's a soloist.
So there you can see what drivers are going to be confronted with when they make their first descent into Eau Rouge, and whoever will be first across, that will be tippy-toeing his way through it, because that's still going to be very slippery indeed.
Well, indeed. So the drivers will have got the message. It's on the timing screens. Although, don't forget, these are rather peripatetic teams. They go from paddock to pit lane and then have to peer into a team's garage to see a timing screen. So hopefully the message will be revealed. There in the pseudo Gulf colours, number 50 Porsche. That's the Michael Verveny, Stefan Reitmeier car. Quite often they do a race each rather than sharing. We'll have to wait and see. Richard Mines with the Vitaphone BMW Z4 goes through. There, the Audi that you just saw going through the shot, the Bathurst 12 Hours winning car, another Darrell Young chassis. And 29 is Christian Traber, Nicolas Traber with their 996 shape 911. And how's that for a rather more standard looking early days Porsche?
Yeah, 993 model, still air-cooled. 996 onwards were fully water-cooled. And that was a major transition within the Porsche. And another 993, I think, looking at just trying to, yeah, it is 993 coming up. So they didn't have the water radiators, they had an oil cooler, but that was more centrally mounted.
Olivier Piquet goes through, and that Maserati, which is a car, the type of car that Vitaphone took to win the Spa 24 Hours, as well as the FIA GT and the FIA GT1 World Championships, that ought to be a pole position setting car in the hands of Sam Hancock.
Was that the MC12, was it fundamentally a Maserati, sorry, Ferrari F50 with different engineering, a bit of bodywork on it? Certainly the V12 was a Ferrari engine.
Yeah, that's right. I think it sort of grew from that. You're right. And Maserati debuted it at the end of 2004 in the works colours, the dark blue colours, and instantly it became
iconic.
The car to beat. Yes,
I mean it's an iconic. I mean the Vitaphone branding on the car. Just from memory, you see that car, just think Maserati and wins and championships and whatever.
Mikhail Bartels, who was the powerhouse behind Vitaphone, very successful himself, not just in terms of being a team owner, but as a racing driver. He had many a win with Andrea Bertolini sharing these cars.
Just watch this car down the hill as it comes out. He's going to move over to the right, but not as much as he would ordinarily do. And that is tricky.
Yeah.
That was a tippy-toe moment there for Sam Hancock. He realized that, oh, I don't feel the bite any longer. But he got it all squared away and continues up the hill.
So there the car coming up towards us. The initial Maserati had a much higher rear wing. One of those allowances, if you like, to keep the car in GT racing was that it had to be pegged back a little, and so the rear wing was lowered to therefore give it less aerodynamic efficiency and therefore lose some of the speed. That let the other brands keep up, and like I said earlier on, it was a kind of very early balance of performance. But it's just a glorious looking car, that, and in those Vitaphone colours, yes, I know there were Red Bull or Vodafone or other colour schemes. That's the one.
That is the colour. That's the, for me, that's the synonymous colour of this MC12 Maserati.
Yeah, Mikhail Bartels brought Vitaphone from the DTM into FIA GT, initially with a Celine. He had a Celine that he shared with Altzen, and then bought the Maserati, and part of the deal was that Andrea Bertolini came with it as the Ferrari test driver of the time. There you've got a big rotation from...
That 116, 118.
I think that's the Juniper, Sean Juniper, initially driven Porsche, the Australian car from about 2005.
As I pointed out, tippy-toe through Eau Rouge and up the hill, because there's so much stuff still on the racetrack that if you get onto that and you start to slide, you ain't stopping until you come to a natural stop.
So there is the Vitaphone Maserati up towards the end of the lap. And oh dear, another one has stopped, and that I think is the Jack Tetley, Nick Mayton Lamborghini. That's one of the earlier Gallardos. That looks like it's coming out of Le Con.
So let's see what Sam Hancock's time is, bearing in mind the track is not up to its optimum. So 2:27, and that's 7 seconds away from what we've seen as the quickest overall time. And I reckon there's about 3 or 4 of those seconds is lost just down the hill into Eau Rouge and up over Radion.
And Sam Hancock, massively experienced driver of historic machines, and doesn't just know how to drive them, he has a huge appreciation for the heritage of them. Previously a part of the Goodwood television commentary team, and an excellent driver coach as well, Alexander Rittweger, in good company there, because Sam will be able to bring him on and give him the confidence to push in these cars. There at the back of the queue, another rather dusty Porsche, number 18.
Yeah.
That's Heiko Ostman's bi-turbo 911 GT2 from the 993 era.
Very collectible right now.
Yeah. Right, 20 minutes of the 40 to go, and this yellow flag out with the car that we'd seen have a spin trying to rejoin. Heiko Ostman then comes downhill.
It's this particular Porsche. Look at the height of the rear wing. I mean, it's just like a scaffolding.
Yes.
I mean, it's just enormous. But that was all done to give a little bit more downforce to the rear, give stability to the rear of the car as the Aston makes its way up, gets through the traffic, and watching the panos also likewise going past the Vita 1 BMW.
Richard Mine's car, and there is Audi 118. That's got another good story to it, because that car that is owned these days by Frederic Laurent, shared with David Cuff, who you go back to the early 90s and Formula Vauxhall Junior in the UK, but that was the 2011 Bathurst 12 Hours winning car. Mark Basseng, Darrell O'Young, Christopher Meese, the winning drivers.
Christopher Meese, what year?
2011.
13 years down the road, Christopher Meese is driving a Mustang here this weekend.
Still as quick as ever.
Yep.
And 2 weeks ago, a Le Mans rookie. Yellow flag, and now we're having a full course yellow. Now there's a car that has stopped at Pouen, so full course yellow to try and move that rather than interrupt the session. Everybody slows right down.
Okay, so wait to see where that car is. Nothing obvious. So there's the Lamborghini that we saw earlier.
So that's the full course yellow, isn't it, to get that out of the way?
That's up at the top of Lake Coombe.
Now, is that Nick Mason? Is that Jack Tetley? Forgive me, I'm trying to work it out, because you can't. The drivers don't have to declare who's behind the wheel, and I think that might well be Jack Tetley getting back into the car.
No obvious signs of any mechanical reason. I mean, there's no fluids coming from the car that we can see. Whatever else it could be is hard to judge.
So that car towed out of the way. You can do this now while everybody's at a safe speed, but you couldn't do that under a live session. They just need to get the car off the track. So everybody slows down. Good response to the flags by the drivers. That's good to see. There is the Farnbacher Racing Ferrari just turning through, and the two Maseratis have got themselves together now. There is the racing box car of Evgeny Kiriv.
I've got a soft spot for Maserati. I've got a soft spot for Lancia. I've got a soft spot for Alfa Romeo. The one I've got the least soft spot for, ironically, is Ferrari, because those three other brands, to me, represent something about the heritage of Italian motorsport.
Ford and Aston Martin, players now, players of years past. The Alexander Lienau, Stefan Joche Aston, they're ahead of the GT of Philip Scamala, that car from 2010. And there, with a very dirty windscreen, having gone through the dust cloud, is Jason Wright's ex-Hector Lester Alan Simonson Ferrari from British GT days. Looks like it's been on a rally stage looking at the front. It's gone ploughing through the dust.
Lovely shamrock in the front. I wonder what country that represents.
Shamrock or a cloverleaf?
Cloverleaf. You're right, there's a cloverleaf.
But Hector Lester, who was the driving force behind that team, shared with success with the late Alan Simonson. We go green again, so the session is back underway. And that means that Jason Wright can push on. He's gone past a green flag, but he's being ever so cautious coming through a rouge. And the Corvette behind wants to get on with the programme. That's 63. That's the John Emberson, Nigel Greensall car. And if it's Nigel behind the wheel of it, he will tonk on.
Yeah, as long as he's got a green flag, then he can get on with the programme.
Yeah.
And there you can see green flag being waved just on the start-finish line. I haven't seen the 75 yet. I don't know if I've missed it. I mean, if you see Lee Maxted Page, still wonder whereabouts that car is. And there is the Ferrari number 17.
Collinson's car, yeah.
I mean, that looks, obviously the aero in the modern car is much more sophisticated, but it has that look of a contemporary GT3 car.
But that was the 458. We had the 488, now the 296 in. So the boundary's still being pushed. 76 Porsches back up and running, isn't it? Jean-Louis Rion's car has rejoined the session, which is good to see, despite its headbutt of the tyre barrier. Big flash of the lights from Philippe Collinson there to the Porsche ahead to say, get out of the way, please. Up the Kemble Straight. Avoid that slippery line. It is offline at this juncture. And Philippe Collinson turns the Duquesne Group Ferrari now up through Les Combes. So it's been a session with, I'm afraid, quite a few in strife here, with a fire early on for Stephen Osborne's BMW, for example.
The Ferrari, the naturally aspirated 458, still one of the best sounding GT cars in the last decade.
Down through Pouhon comes there, the Ferrari. So for the moment, at least, Philippe Collinson has got the road to himself. Sam Hancock still pushing on in number 2, Maserati then. The Alessandro Pierguidi Sandy Negrão GT1 World Championship entry downhill. And again, that just makes a wonderful noise. Big, long car. Sam tiptoes his way over that dust, over the speedy dry. And the Aston behind him completely skips the corner.
Yeah, it got a little bit wide in that transition, and the car just drifts offline, off the racing line, but obviously able to continue without any issue. So up the hill into Les Combes. You know, the track right now through turns 1 up to 5, I would say tricky is the best way to describe it. Down into Bruxelles for the Maserati. So a variety of lines. Sam Hancock taking the sort of take it in early and hug the curb version, or the alternative is to make a distinct, it's almost like a triangle entry early, run it wide, then cut it back again to get a very good straight line off Bruxelles, then down to Speaker's Corner, Jackie Eakes Curve, or Corner with a new name, whichever currently it's got.
155 Ferrari just out of the way. Xavier Gallant's another of the 458s. So lots of familiar brands within this grid. They're not the easiest of cars to run, of course, modern GT cars, but good to have the Paul Phillips getting out of the way in the Perfect Circle 997 Porsche. Dates back to 2010, even though it was racing almost a decade on, but good to have it on the grid. There is Sam Hancock's car then. And we've got one under investigation. It is the number 12 Porsche of Marc de Siebenthaler and Enrique Gempel for possibly overtaking under that full course yellow procedure. So 3 or 4 cars without times, which is a shame. That is another of the Vitaphone liveried GT cars of the history of the sport, but it was by that stage the team had rebranded itself not as Vitaphone but Vita 41. The colour scheme was the same. They moved from a Ferrari in 2011 to the BMW Z Falls in 2012 and ran them both in the, as it was then called, Blancpain Endurance Series and the FIA GT1 World Championships final year, and also in the City Challenge, the first event in Baku at the end of the year. Again, the livery works on that car for me just as easily. Richard Mines, the Hong Kong-based Brit, is the man that owns this car. He's got a wonderful fleet of cars, and those early Endurance Series days where you had the Audis taking on the BMWs from different teams.
Halcyon days. But, I mean, I know that the Vita for One livery on the BMW is iconic, but it's still, I go back to the Maserati, that was, when it first came out, it was so dramatic, and it was such an effective mix of the sort of almost turquoise green and black, and it just seemed to fit the flow of the body shape of the Maserati particularly.
Michael Bartels still drove the cars within this period. Richard Mines came from British Club Racing. He drove a Ford Focus initially in the National Saloon Cup. I think he had a spell even before that in the final days of Road Saloon racing. but it's been in historic machinery that he has had a lot of success at Goodwood, for example, with Rob Huff as a co-driver, and in the variety of cars, be them modern sports cars or historic touring cars, you name it. And Richard's always been a big supporter of the Goodwood events, but as I say, has lots of success and a good track record within historic touring car and GT racing of late. The Payno still deafening everybody as it goes through. What else can we find in this little battle pack? 212 there, which is the Aston Martin Patrice Garouste and Etienne Garoust's DBRS 9 from 2007. Early GT3 spec. And behind is the Viper that Eric Messach was talking about earlier on, Christophe Van Riet at the wheel of it now. The Payno's there, out of the Dams stable. Still looks quite futuristic, doesn't it?
I mean, it always was very futuristic. I mean, it's just the swoopy style of the bodywork. Interestingly, in spite of the circuit being slightly compromised down at Eau Rouge, some people have made progress, and one is the number 57, Ferrari of Jonathan Mitchell. He's up to 4th place, so that's a pretty good effort. And others, there's about 4 or 5 improvers. So in spite of the track being not at its optimum, there is performance there to be found.
There to the chicane comes the 4th fastest car in this session, Olivier Galland at the wheel of the Paynos. His head rattling. James Weaver always used to talk about just how unpleasant they were inside the car because of the noise, and your head would ring for days afterwards, especially after doing Le Mans. But great charismatic cars. Then they became, of course, an open-top car.
Yeah, the concept of the car was to basically make the definitive mid-engine, but front-engine GT car with around the rear to really maximize the diffuser area, so that if you have got a mid-rear engine car, that interferes with the surface area under the car. Whereas if you've got a mid-front engine car, you've got a huge amount of underspace to make that diffuser really work. And I think in principle it was a great idea. Maybe, again, just a bit ahead of its time, it didn't fulfill its expectation.
It was also up against big budget outfits, because around the same time you had Mercedes still building GT1 cars, so did Porsche, that 911 GT1, which kind of moved the regulations on a page or two. Paynos had to play catch-up. Maserati did the same thing in 04 when it brought this, the MC12, into competition. Sam Hancock's car that he shares with Alexander Ritvega, 7th.
Again, I mean, one of them out, Yevgeny Kirev, in his Maserati, up to 2nd place, and he's now within literally about 66 thousandths of a second, and that is pretty impressive.
There it is.
That is a pretty impressive drive right now. We're on the gearbox, or under the rear wing almost, of Sam Hancock, and that's going to give Sam a bit of a wake-up call, because I think he probably felt he was the quickest car out there right now. But he's not. It's the red and white Maserati, the Vodafone, that really has done a stunning job in difficult circumstances and put himself provisionally on the front row of the grid. So let's see if Sam Hancock... Oh no! That was, you could read it a million miles away.
Evgeny Kirev, I was about to say, racer and rally driver and businessman, sticks his nose up the inside, turns Sam Hancock's car around. Oh dear.
I think that, I think that Kirev genuinely thought that Hancock was staying to the left to look at the damage to both cars, but particularly to the Vodafone Maserati, damage around that right front. So Sam Hancock, having to get it all back together again. And that was an avoidable incident, unquestionably, but let's not apportion blame, because I think it was a misunderstanding in the part of both drivers.
Let's see how much damage then has been done. Sam Hancock at least can get the car moving. He can drive the car, but let's see how much damage has been done. Here's the replay. Wait for the impact, because it's going to turn him around very sharply. There it is. Sam Hancock turns in, but bang, around he goes.
Well, I wonder, will those two competitors have a little word with one another and say, well, sorry, mate, I thought you were letting me through, and the other one say, well, you weren't even up against my rear wheel. You hit the bodywork, not the car.
Yeah.
Anyway, misunderstanding, unfortunate, and two beautiful cars. Hopefully nothing of any consequence other than maybe a little bit of spit and polish won't sort out.
Adrian Wilmot about to take off his crash helmet. He's done. As I said early on, go back to the 80s. He was in the junior Formula Ford ranks, but now enjoying himself in a variety of historic cars run by JRT. Right, Olivier Galland still pressing on in the Paynos. comes out of Speaker's Corner, Jack Eaps' corner. There aren't that many still on the track at the moment. We've got quite a few in the pit lane as we've got only a few minutes of the session left.
Well, he's fractionally up in Sector 1. He's got a clear track, so there's no interference. And as long as the track for the remainder of the lap remains clear, which it looks like it's going to be, so we could see the Penos get itself up onto the front row of the grid. It's currently half a second away from the fastest time, which is still with the 128 Corvette. So what's going to be the middle sector time for the Penos? Is it purple, green, or yellow? Purple! Wow!
Olivier Galland having a real go here, isn't he, to try to get into the 220s. His best lap is a 221.4, but if he can get himself ahead of Andrew Jordan, that would give him pole position, or at least it would give him the fastest time out of this session. Then you take the better time. But Olivier Galland then coming now up towards the chicane.
And the Gulf Porsche, you can see the driver's hand going up, indicating pass on the right. So this could be the fastest lap of the session. And the closing moments of the session comes across start-finish line, and it's going to be...
Not revealed.
No, it doesn't. It didn't change position.
No, well, the clock carried on ticking for some reason. The last sector time didn't feature, so we'll try and unravel that. But yes, maybe it's a transponder that's gone down because it didn't get a final sector time, so the lap is a mystery. Just looking to see what the Hazelman's Lotus have done, but I'm not sure that's been out. Can't find a time from that car. Right, so we've got 4 minutes and change on the clock. The incident between the two Maseratis is under investigation. There, coming up towards us, is 129, which is the Vasily Vladkin, Andrei Solokovtsev Audi.
A little bit of a wobble under braking into Les Combes. Just a sort of little snatch on the front brakes, just unsettled the car on that critical entry point, but gathered up and on its way. And I'd love to know what the time for that last lap for the Panos was. I expected the clock to stop. It looked to me as if it could be a potential provisional pole lap.
I think the transponder may have given up the ghost because it hasn't been... Well, has it now been credited? Yeah, it's got a 2:58 in the first sector, so it's missed the last sector, but it's still being counted. There's one of the early Marcos from the computer centre days sponsoring the cars in the late 90s.
I remember Marcos when the chassis was made from marine ply. The initial Marcos, what a stunning little race car they were, with a 997 Cosworth, basically a Formula Junior engine in it, little screamers, and the Marcos was fantastic. Jackie Oliver raced a Marcos many years in his early career, had a big shunt and found him sitting in a pile of scrap marine ply.
All right, Olivier Galland's lap has been found. It was a 2:19 that put him up to up to second, and Sam Hancock's now being given a lap, which is a 2:18, and that puts him top. So, a bit of shuffling of the order. So maybe transponders have been having glitches. That era of Marcos, I want to say, is a sort of not just Chris Marsh, but also Chris Hodgett's type era of racing.
Poor Oyser.
Not in those colours, though.
No, not in those colours, but in a Marcos. He was one of the...
Yeah. Well, he won the British Championship in 2000, didn't he? Later, sorry, or won races in it in 2000. Callum Lockie took the title in the next iteration. There is the WRT Audi of years past going through, and 97, which is Stephen Keating's LM500. So the 600 was, I think, the car that took them to Le Mans, and then the later cars in greater success once Core Oils had taken over, really, running Marcos as a race operation, and brought them into FIA and British GT events. All right, what have we got left? 2 more minutes on the clock. 1:29. There is the Johnny Westbrook Audi that was a Rosberg team car back in the early days of GT3, and then it went to the Nova driver team in both the Blancpain Sprint and Endurance Championships, and I think it ended up with the Tocqueville Motorsport team because it was the car that Phil Hansen drove early in his career in the Le Mans Cup. Look closely on that car and you'll see Emily and Peggy, the names of Johnny's daughters, who I think are glued to this, watching for the family car. There it is, out of Pouhon. And we had Andrei Solokovtsev being interviewed earlier on. Now, if he's been put behind the wheel of it, he is going very, very nicely, adapting from GT4 to older GT3 machinery.
Yeah, I don't know how much difference in terms of overall grip and aero the modern GT4 car might have, because they're making massive strides in terms of their performance vis-a-vis where GT3 is today. But going back to the cars of this era, there's probably not an awful lot of difference between the performance in terms of overall balance, grip, and lap time.
The Pano just breezes by. That's a much older car as well than the Audi, but then Olivier Gallant backs out of it because he realises it's all getting a bit crowded up the road.
Yeah, no, he did the right thing. He saw himself going into a sort of a cul-de-sac of 3 cars, and he was on the inside, and he did the right thing, backed out of it, let these 3 cars continue on with their battle up into the chicane. 3 into 1 doesn't go, and it's now 1 comes out and the other 2 sort of trip over themselves and then finish their laps.
Solokovtsev, if it is him behind the wheel, comes across the line. Got the little JEP sticker on the front of the car, Jacob Ebury Photography, the British photographer who these days looks after the SRO activities in World Challenge as well as British GT, and his sticker adorning the car, which has been put with the permission of Vincent Voss into that WRT livery, even though it wasn't an original WRT car. They're very, very bravely around the outside the BMW that then runs out of road. That was a kind of Ruver Alson style move, wasn't it, really? Full commitment.
Oh, I think Uwe would have done it better than that. He would have taken those other 2 cars out. He wouldn't have gone up deep and overrun the corner. Uwe Alson was a hard driver at every level in which he raced.
Now, that leopard livery, not overly dissimilar in the colours to the Vitaphone, is it?
Yeah, it is. It looks, I mean, it looks... again, a lot of the... To me, the colour schemes work with certain chassis, certain cars, because of the natural flow of the bodywork. And what Maserati have got is that lovely sort of languorous front to tail, typically Italian style of race car.
Not surprised if Jason Wright can't see the flag as he comes up to it, because that windscreen is so dirty. The Italian domiciled American goes through, and the flag is out, the session at an end. The car's being marshalled off the track at La Source, straight down the pit lane to save some time and also get them back quickly to their teams. There is the Porsche of Sebastian Glazer and Michael Kammermann. So they've got a race this afternoon, and I fear that we'll have a few gaps on the grid, given that it's been a bit of a drama-filled session for some.
Let's hope there's enough time to get the cars repaired. Let's hope the damage to the cars is more superficial. But certainly Mark Sumpner, with that oil leak, where it ever came from, we will hopefully find out. But my concern would be it hasn't damaged the motor. These teams are not going to carry a number of spare engines in the back of their truck. And in many cases, the engine may well be the original engine that the car raced in period with, which is only enhances the car's value. So as much of the provenance of a car you can retain, the better.
The Bentley, ready to go back to its team. Gregory Drio's early Bentley Continental GT3, the M Sport built car. That was the Juniper Porsche I thought had a spin early on in the session, number 16, the car of Mark and his son, Matthias Devis, but the car that had a Spa 24-hour history from memory, raced here back in 2008. Sean Juniper, Craig Baird, Rodney Forbes, the drivers.
Well, Craig Baird, that takes me back. One of the great New Zealand drivers that came across and potentially had a big career, but then just sort of disappeared.
Went back to racing down under with success, but he came to the British Touring Car Championship, didn't he? And it just didn't work. He had a very uncompetitive car. In the end, at the end of the second session, Olivier Gallant with that Penos, quicker than Sam Hancock by 33 thousandths. Peter Cox third, and then Andrew Jordan fourth. Evgeny Kiriv fifth from Adrian Wilmot, and then Jonathan Mitchell. The Vladimir Solokovtsev Audi 8th from Gregory Drio's Bentley, and Matthias Baker and Jordan Kruger 10th. Ika Verdonk 11th. So we rattle through the others. A quick look to see that one or two only did a handful of laps, but we'll get as many as we can out on track later on. The timetable slipping, of course, because of those long stoppages that we've had in that. The race, in theory, will get underway at 10 minutes past 6. Might be a few minutes after that, with everything else that's got to be crammed into the day, though. Didn't see the Lotus, disappointingly, of the Hesemans brothers. It did go out yesterday, so maybe they're saving that, make sure all the problems are fixed, and then it can hit the track a little bit later on in the day. So there, the Endurance Racing Legends field, ready to head back to the teams. Plenty of work needing to be done for some, and we'll have a look in a moment at some of the highlights of that very nostalgia-fueled session, which had at the beginning of the session 1 or 2 locking up or running out of racetrack. Mark Sumter had a big drama that put oil on the road and caused his big spin, and our first red flag, a couple of other cars having gone off the road, and then we had another big drama with oil all over the road. That needed to be sorted out. We'd had a red flag anyway for Stephen Osborne's BMW coming to a halt. Andrew Jordan set the gun time early on. Then as the session continued, Peter Cox got himself up to 3rd in number 125 Lamborghini. Sam Hancock and Alexander Rittweger's Maserati 2nd, just 33 thousandths shy of a storming Olivier Galland, who was fastest in the Paynos. And that sets us up nicely for our first race for these cars at 6:10 later on today.